The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mindgarden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions. It is time for another season of the Sandy and Toddcast, believe it or not.
I know. Season 8 already. I was just all week long, I was sending you different memories that I was getting in my Facebook feed.
I was wondering why you were doing that.
Because they were our really old videos that we did, lives that we did from the very beginning of the podcast, and they were kind of fun to watch. So
we're actually going to be going back in time a lot during this season because we're going to be talking about history and how it, kind of ties in with paranormal and all that kind of stuff. In fact, we've named it History Ain't a Mystery. Season 8, Episode 1 with the Sandy and Toddcast is next.
Crowds, arguments, loud noises, narcissists, energy vampires. Does that seem scary to you? It can to an empath. Sandy and Todd from the Sandy and Toddcast invite you to join them for a new podcast, the Empathecary Podcast. These two empaths know exactly what it's like, and they'd like to share their stories, knowledge, and ideas with you. Dive deep into the world of the empath. The Empathecary Podcast with Sandy and Todd. Find it anywhere you find your podcasts and like them on Facebook.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Welcome to the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
he is Todd.
And we are kicking off another season. It's always fresh and exciting when we kick off a season. And then we're a couple episodes in. It's like, when are we done with this season? Actually, last season, I didn't feel that way. Like, last season was just interesting because we had all the interaction with the listeners and stuff like that.
It was really fun last season. It was something that we kind of did off the cuff. Like, we weren't really planning on it, but since when do we ever go according to plan anyways?
Exactly.
So there we were, and here we are today. And, you know, this is going to be a really cool season. I say that every season, but it is because this is sort of something that's very close to our heart, and that's history and how history sort of shapes the paranormal world and what we can do with that history. So pretty cool. And we're going to take a walk back in time, not that far, just to June of last year for at least the first half of the season to talk about my trip out to see you, Dave's and my trip out to see you last summer, and our trip to Washington Island and all of the things that we experienced on that trip.
The reason why we kind of talked about this is because, you know, we believe that like the history is so important, and we love the history part of it. Getting responses from energies or spirits or ghosts or whatever you want to call it is all great too. But it's like, how does that tie into somebody's life? What happened in their life? You know, what was going on during that time? And, you know, with deaths in my family, it's like, I don't want my mom and dad's only memory, you know, down the line to be the fact that they've got a headstone in some cemetery someplace. Because when I'm gone and my sisters are gone, who's going to be talking about them? Somebody needs to tell their stories.
That's
and
right. We all deserve to have our stories told.
I thought, why not use like the podcast to tell stories that then are there forever? The audio saved, whatever. We can talk about our experiences, our listeners, if they want to share their, you know, history stories of family or whatever. I would love to tell those stories and kind of keep them for many, many generations. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season because there's going to be paranormal, there's going to be history, there's going to be goofiness, and it should be a lot of fun.
As usual.
Yeah.
As usual. But, when you think about it, it's really profound that, when we pass, not that we have children, but, when anyone passes, their children have their stories, or as many stories as they're able to have of you. And then maybe those get trickled down a little bit to their children, and maybe one or two trickle down to their children, maybe. And then by the time you get a handful of generations down, it's not really happening. And so that's why I personally think it's so important to tell these stories of these people and sort of tie them in with the experiences that you and I have had, and to share that with someone and to help these people live on.
Yeah, I think it's important. And you're right. Like, I'm thinking about, I know stories about my parents, but there are stories about my parents I didn't know about until after they passed away. And then you think about the stories you know about your grandparents. Well, that's even less, right? Because it's only the ones that somebody in the family told you about somehow, whether it was an uncle or maybe your grandparents or maybe your parents. That's it. And then I know nothing about my great-grandparents. I mean, I didn't even know that, remember the whole house thing and all that kind of stuff? Those were my great-grandparents that, had this huge house and family and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I had no idea.
Well, and you can't always trust that those passed down stories are actually the full truth.
Right.
One of my biggest regrets, and I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, but one of my biggest regrets is not asking my grandparents more questions about their lives directly when they were alive, because then I would know what really truthfully happened to them in their lives. And instead, I kind of had to rely on my mother, and we all know my mother's not the most...
Listen, she's an encyclopedia of information. When she says something, it's something.
Yeah, it sure is something. All right, Todd. So, it's very difficult. Let me give you an example. I grew up being told, and not a lot, not often, but just I have memories of here and there, a mention of the fact that one of my ancestors, or a relative of one of my ancestors, not directly my ancestor, was kidnapped by Native Americans in the 1700s and lived with them for years and years and years and years. She actually passed away. Now, I had heard that story a handful of times over the years, but you don't really take it seriously because it's so far removed, the 1700s. I mean, come on.
Right.
Well, it was only through my very diligent work on myheritage.com, which they don't pay for me to say that, but it was only through my work that I actually confirmed that happened. And what really started it was the episode of Ghost Hunters, where they were down in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and they actually mentioned one of my ancestors, who I am literally a seventh generation direct descendant of, Jonathan Slocum. It was his daughter, Frances, who in 1775, I believe it was, down in Wilkes-Barre, was actually taken by the Native Americans and adopted into the tribe and grew up as a Native American. And so to me, that's such a personal story, because I grew up hearing little bits and pieces of it, but it's something that is actually factual, and I got to confirm it. And now in a couple of weeks, Dave and I are going down to Scranton, Pennsylvania, to visit with family, and we're actually going to Wilkes-Barre, and we're going to go visit all of these places where my ancestors lived and were. And it's just sort of that full circle thing. So stories can have an amazing impact on you, even if you don't know whether they're fully true or not. There's so many ways today to kind of confirm them or say, okay, well, maybe that wasn't the truth. But there's so many ways to investigate that. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about that this season too, the different ways that you can do that. I actually traced that side of my family back to the 1400s in England and Scotland. And so history is just this huge, amazing, very intimate thing. It can be very intimate as well.
And I think it gets a bad rap because when you're in school and you have history class, you learn all this generalization about the country and, you know, stuff like that. And to me, that was always very boring. I don't necessarily care about exact dates and years. I like to know about the experiences and what that was like. And so when you take it to a personal level, that's when I get interested. Okay. When you talk about the Civil War, that's a war. I don't know the fucking dates on it. I know lots of people died, whatever. Right. But when you take it down to the personal level and you talk about the families that were affected and you talk about the men who fought and all that, I mean, that's the areas that I liked. We never got into that. You never heard the personal stories about anything. It was just generalizations. These dates happened. These fights happened. And in the end, you know, we all know how it ended, even though there's parts of the country that want to deny that. But, you know, so
it's
for me, it doesn't take it down.
Shit.
Yeah.
It's boring shit. And nobody wants to hear that stuff. And, you know, that's a good point, too, because as I get older and the more I get into discovering history without having to sit in school and read books, I realize that everything that they teach you in school, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this one. Everything that they teach you in school is not necessarily the whole truth, the whole picture.
Right.
I just did we've talked about this a few times, my show Empire Spirits, and you can look up that page on Facebook if you want to follow us. We just did an amazing investigation last Monday night of filming, and it was probably one of the craziest places I've ever been. If anybody remembers me talk about the Angry Garlic investigation from my previous season, I think this one actually has the Angry Garlic beat, and that takes a lot for me to say. This one was just crazy. This was a 200-year-old building, Todd, and as I dove into the history of it, now there's a difference for me between going in cold and learning the history, because I think that if you do it correctly, if it's the right balance, it really helps round out my look at things as I go in. I don't want to know all of the little bits and pieces of things that happen there. I don't want to know necessarily what they believe is in there. But what I do want to do is get a feel for the place sometimes beforehand. So I did a little history, and it's so interesting because the Native Americans were on that land, and there was a lot of not so good things happening and a lot of shoddy deals in the 1700s, late 1700s, by land developers that sort of took the land than they did actually reimburse the Native Americans for the land that they obtained, shall we say. And you know, you don't hear about that in history books. You don't hear about those shoddy little deals and the fact that there were so many skirmishes and problems between the quote unquote settlers and the Native Americans. And it was just so interesting to learn the history of this particular area. And so it actually helped me in the investigation quite a bit. At one point we did, you know, everybody knows we love Kindred Spirits, and they do the spirit box with the headphones. And one of them asked the question, the other one is under. And we had Michelle, who is in the show, we had her go under with the headphones, and I was asking a lot of the questions. And in the end, we did determine that there was a gentleman, and you'll have to watch the whole episode to see how we got to this point, and it'll be out, I think, in the fall. Anyways, I determined that this gentleman was, in fact, not tied to the building itself. The gentleman was tied to the land because he was, from what I can tell, he was killed. And I did a little pendulum work in the midst of all of the spirit box things, and it told me that the man was killed by the Native Americans. And it sort of like was a light bulb going off in my head that, wait a minute, we're not just investigating a building, we're investigating the land and all of the negative stuff that this land has absorbed over the years, and how these people lived and what happened to them in essentially the late 1700s. So just a really interesting story that involved understanding the history and where everything came from in this episode. It was just fantastic. It was really probably my favorite at this point, and I've done some amazing things, but probably my favorite just based on the amount of action that was going on in that place. So very cool. But history came into play quite a bit in that episode.
When people ask about like investigating and you say you're going someplace, I think people forget that, yes, you're investigating that location. Mm-hmm. But by location, it doesn't necessarily mean just that building. It could mean other buildings that were there. It could mean something. You know, there is research that shows that energies can move through communities and be in one location in one part of the day and another location. So, I mean, there's so much of that. And it's almost, again, like speaking of someone's history, who you are today, Sandy, where you're at right now in your life is based on everything that ever happened in your life prior to this. Everything that happened in the lives of your parents prior to this, everything that happened in their parents. And you just keep going back because it's generational. Things, you know, get passed on and issues get passed on and situations get passed on. And so when you go and investigate a quote unquote location, yes, it's this building, but you can never be certain that what you're experiencing is because of that building or because of something completely else.
It's funny that you say that because this was probably the clearest evidence of that, the clearest example that I can think of, because it really was kind of a light bulb moment. And over the years of investigating, I've sort of gone in that direction of understanding that not everything is always as you expect it to be, and that you have to sometimes think outside of the box, and you have to sometimes pivot your mindset right in the middle of an investigation. Because here I'm going in thinking, okay, I am picking up on this spirit or this energy here. I'm picking up on this, but who is this?
Right.
And why is this person here? This doesn't fit in with what I know of the building. How is this happening? And I think being open-minded and able to change your mindset in the midst of it is really helpful in understanding and helping them. This man asked for help. This man literally asked for help during the spirit box session. And, you know, it's if you can help them and at least acknowledge them, isn't that what we're doing? Isn't that what we're all about? Isn't that what we want to do, is acknowledge them and say, we know that you existed. We know that this happened to you, and we're sorry that this happened to you. You know, it's such investigating is such a rewarding thing. But at the same time, it can really take an emotional and physical toll on you. Mm-hmm. Because especially speaking for me, as an empath, I don't even know what to call myself. I call myself an empath medium. I don't know. Psychic, empath, medium, whatever you want to call me. You become them sometimes in a weird way. Not physically, but you become them because you feel them and you feel that there's something wrong and you just want to help. And isn't that really what we're supposed to be there for? Like, why is this man here? And to your point, I do believe that they are not stuck physically. I do not believe they're physically bound. I believe that they're at a place because they have some sort of emotional connection to the place that they are in at that time. So fear, anger,
happiness,
you know, missing someone's sadness, anything. They're there because they're emotionally connected to it in some way. And some want to leave and some don't want to leave. And I believe that they have that choice to make. And I can help give them that free will. But, you know, it just history is just amazing to me. I'm sure I'm just rambling on, but it's such a big topic to talk about, you know. So very interesting. Interesting investigation, completely different from the big investigation apps we did a couple weeks ago up north, and learned a lot in both investigations. So very cool, though. So that's what this season will be about. We're going to talk about Washington Island, which we both loved. And although we both felt kind of weird about it, didn't we? Washington Island. You know,
the first time I went, and we've told this story before, we'll talk more about it on the episode, but you know, that was a very different situation for me. It was, you know, and I learned a lot in that situation. But when we went back, I was a little bit more prepared with more knowledge. And we just, you know, it was one of those situations, whether it was Washington Island or that Door County thing, was just a very incredible experience, and so much to share. But we're going to be able to talk a little bit about the history of Washington Island. You know, why may there be some things hanging out there, you know?
Well, Todd, if you don't know the history of a place, you can't fully understand why something might be happening.
Right.
You just can't. You know, you have to know the history. They go hand in hand. I think it was a Ghost Hunters episode many, many years ago. It was probably in their first or second season when somebody said something to that effect. It's like, you can't have the paranormal without history, you know, because of the fact that it explains a lot of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why this energy or spiritual energy is there in that particular place. So it's just wonderful. I love history. I love going to cemeteries. I love learning about people. I have so many pictures. It's funny, Todd. I have so many pictures in my phone. I was just going through them today.
So many
of cemeteries and of like one particular stone somewhere, because I will see a stone that I'm drawn to and take a picture of it so I have all the information, and then I go look that person up. And I learn their story. And I do that all the time, especially in the summertime. Poor Dave. # poor Dave. He wanders around. So.
We actually, for next season, we should just do a # poor Dave's season. We just bring up everything that we feel bad for Dave about.
I'm actually super, super proud of Dave, because Dave has... Well, we got some I'll just say this. We got some incredible evidence at that location last Monday night. And even poor Dave looked at me and said, I have no explanation for this in the scientific or common sense world. None of this makes sense. This has to be paranormal. There's no way around it. And for my husband to say that was a lot.
I'm so proud of him.
I'm really proud of him, because he just gave in and said, you're right. There is nothing here that we can explain it.
Like he's never had to give in on anything in your relationship.
I know, right? He doesn't even say anything anymore. He just does it. So
that poor SOB.
Listen, after 21 years, Todd, it's, you know, what are you going to do? So quick update on my eye. I was convinced a couple of weeks ago when we spoke that I had well, we've spoken since then, but when we all spoke together, that I had a bleed and that I was afraid that my retina may be detaching. Well, that wasn't the case. I went in last Wednesday, and my eye specialist, my retina specialist, confirmed that it had nothing to do with retinopathy. It had nothing to do with my retina or anything at all. It wasn't a bleed, that my retinas look fantastic and I'm stable. And he upped my injections to every 12 weeks instead of 10 weeks. And then he told me that it was a floater and that the flashes of light were the same kind of thing and that it's because I'm old.
Which I suspected, and I told you that because it's I have that condition myself, and I was basically told it was because you're getting older, and we're both nearsighted, and it happens a lot with people who are nearsighted, especially if they're severely nearsighted. That's
what he said too. He said,
of course.
So I said, so doctor, I said a very straight face. I said, so doctor, you're telling me basically that I'm old, and he kind of smirked and he says, well, as my father would say, at this time in your life. At this period in your life, this is what's going to happen. And so I was like, oh, great. So then he gives me my injections in my eyes. And what does he do? He hits a capillary. So in my left eye for the past week and a half, it's starting to clear up now. But I have looked like I am possessed by the devil.
It's all red and bloody.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can see fine. And it's not painful. But, everybody's gotten them. Sometimes if you sneeze too hard, you can get one.
The only time I've had that, and I've had it really bad. The only time I've had that is after it was 19. I'm gonna guess like 1993, and the radio station I was working at got sold. So we started drinking at noon at lunch. And I didn't wrap up until closing time at 2:30 in the morning.
I love you.
And so I spent the next day puking my guts out and blew every blood vessel in my God.
Todd. Of course,
I was young. I was 20, 23, come on.
That's great. Oh, don't even bring me back to the stupid things I used to do when I was in my early 20s with drinking and partying and ridiculousness. But so we did a fun thing the other day, too. I just wanted to laugh about this for a second because it was funny. You said to me, what was I doing? I was getting ready to go somewhere, do something.
So let me just preface this by saying I have no idea what you're talking about. So this will be news to me.
You're like, I was getting ready to do something. And you're like, could you just say 3 lines for me for a commercial?
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, okay, sure. I don't care because we've done them before. And it turned out to be a commercial for popcorn.
Right.
And I don't know, did you save the audio from that? Because it was hilarious. The two of us looking at each other. We were on our StreamYard actually looking at each other, trying to say the lines. And I couldn't look at him because he was pretending his mouth was full of popcorn and trying to say his lines. And every time I'd say it, I'd laugh. Like I could not do it. It was the funniest thing ever. But we got through it and it sounded good.
Do you want me to see if I can find it?
Yeah, see if you can find it.
Okay.
That would be fun.
Let me just see. I don't think it's
finally, I'm like, don't look at me. Let me just say my lines.
Let me just see. Where the hell would it be? I've got the actual commercial so we could listen to that.
Like a before and after.
Oh, no, that's the bag of popcorn. I don't know if I saved the actual... this is so... I got that, but I don't think I have the audio of us playing around.
It was so... Finally, I was just like, Todd, just don't even look at me. Don't give me my lines. I don't need a prompt. I'm just going to read them because I will never get through this. I don't know what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be getting ready to go somewhere. Oh, the baby shower, maybe. I had a baby shower last weekend, so I think that might have been it. But play the commercial.
Hold on, let me just see. Maybe I can find it real quick. Okay, that's the bag. We know that. We could leave this all in. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, that's the music. Let me just see. Maybe I don't have it. Baseball season is here. Now, other stuff. I'll play the actual commercial for you here. It is.
It actually turned out really good.
Here it comes, everybody. This is so good.
Why are you eating so much popcorn?
Well, I'm making a difference for Wisconsin schools, and I was able to easily shop online.
I mean, it does look yummy.
OMG, you've got to try this cheddar jalapeno.
It is good.
Oh, and I ordered a bunch of other gourmet flavors, chocolate delight, cookies and cream, and even dill pickle, delivered to my door. And I help Wisconsin schools in the process. Go to the Wisconsin Popcorn Shop at civicmedia.us/shop. That's civicmedia.us/shop. And order now. The shop closes April 10th. So there you go.
That was the finished product.
That was the finished.
What we had to go through to get there was was interesting to say the least. So that was pretty funny. So that was fun. And I don't know, I guess looking forward to, we're going to be in the 70s this week here in central New York. So
here too.
Pretty excited about that. And made some more plans for Cleveland in September, which we are going to. So this is what Todd and I are going to do. We're so sneaky. We're going to.
And again, let me just preface this by saying I have no idea what she's talking about.
Yeah, whatever. You're the one who said, oh, maybe we should contact them. We're going to find some haunted places in Cleveland and ask them if we can get some tours, since we can highlight them on the podcast so that we can get into these places. So we're going to try and do that. We're going to come up with some places. There's some really cool places in Cleveland, Todd.
Yeah. I know the old train station. I don't know what the name of it is, but it's a really cool place. And I know the Ghost Hunters did it years ago. I would love to get in there.
Well, you know what? It doesn't hurt to try. It never hurts to try. What's the worst that can happen? They say no or completely ignore me like some places do.
Right.
But, you never know. So.
All right. Well, that's what we know. That's what the season is going to be about. So we hope you tag along for the ride. We'll be back in just a moment. Here's our typical spiel.
You can find the Sandy and Toddcast on any of the platforms that you normally find your podcasts, including YouTube and Twitter. Be sure to like the Sandy and Toddcast on Facebook to keep up on the latest goings-on, including each week's episode. You can also join our group, Stay Weirdos, friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, for more fun. Stay Weirdos is a safe place to share your thoughts, feelings, ideas, and random inappropriate memes without judgment. Sandy and Todd also have a podcast called the Empathecary Podcast. It's for empaths, by empaths. And if you know an empath, you might want to listen too. Find and like the page on Facebook. And finally, if you're thinking about starting your own podcast and just aren't sure where to start, Sandy and Todd can also help with that too. Mindgarden Media is their latest project where the dynamic duo can guide you every step of the way in your podcasting journey. Editing, producing and consulting is what they do. Like Mindgarden Media on Facebook or email them at themindgardenmedia@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for staying weird.
And there you go. Season 8 is upon us.
Season 8 is upon us. I'm very excited about this. So thank you once again to everybody for hanging with us for 7 full freaking seasons and hopefully hanging with us for season 8.
Excellent. All right. So that's it. Until we talk to you again. Bye.
Bye.